Welcome back to Maximum News, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, as always, your friendly neighborhood Simpsons kin, Max Derrat, and I'm joined, as always, by Sybsidian of the Triple S League. This week, it's just like last week. We have a lot of stuff to get into, so we're just going to jump right into it. First of all, Dune. Syb, it's kind of taken over the entire pop culture consciousness right now. Dune Part 2 came out last Friday. I saw it, and because we have so much stuff to talk to, I'm just going to get right to the point. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. The last time that I felt I'd seen something this special, like something this transcendently good, was when I saw Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King in theaters when I was 10. It's been 20 years since I've seen a movie like that. I went to see Dune Part 2, and it is instantly in definitely my top 20, maybe even my top 10 favorite films of all time. I was that impressed by it. Syb, you saw it. And this is relevant to the world of gaming. Trust me, guys. Well, we'll get to it in a second, but I'm just curious. Syb, what did you think of the movie? You said you saw it, right?
Yeah, we went to go see it yesterday because we were going to be talking about it today. So we went to see it in theaters. We were, humming and hawing about whether or not we wanted to see it in theaters or wait a little bit, but it was it was nice. We have a good place to go to for that. So
nice. But what'd you think of it?
I really wish, after having watched 2 seasons of Foundation, I can honestly say that I would prefer heavily for the Dune series to be a proper long form series.
Yeah.
It's not enough time to get into these characters. I was thinking about it, like it felt like 2 of the major characters in this particular movie were only on screen for about maybe 4.5 minutes tops.
But
and I really wanted to have the ability to get to know those characters a lot more. And while I think that Foundation's not nearly as good as it's got a pretty good premise, but it's also kind of it's not as good as I would like it. But that show having there's 2 seasons, 10 episodes per season. It's long, beefy content. It's almost 10 hours. You get to know the characters a whole lot more. So that's my only gripe with it, because it was so good. But looking at a bunch of the characters, I'm like, I want to know more about this character. And the movie's over.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's only so much you can compact into a movie that's under 3 hours, especially with source material like Dune. But as somebody who hasn't ever read the books, I felt that what was given to us was sufficient, and not only sufficient. The reason why it had such a profound impact on me was just because, as somebody who actually has spent a lot more time with his life watching movies and playing games, and studying film and the different disciplines that go into creating a film, I'd never seen a movie, aside from Return of the King, that took cinematography, music, action, acting, storytelling, and brought it all together in such a sublime mixture. It's just such a perfect representation of all the different disciplines that go into making a film. Even including the writing for me. But I totally respect, people are familiar with the source material, wish they could have gone into it more. And even, I know some people who saw it, they're like, man, it was good, but it's just, because I love stories so much, I do tend to prefer TV, because that's more of a storyteller's medium than movies are.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, and fair enough. But anyways, the reason why we're talking about Dune is because of the movie and how it seems to be slowly inching its way to becoming the next big franchise like Lord of the Rings was. And one of the things that it's doing in order to help ensure this is it's producing a massive multiplayer online game in the form of Dune Awakening. We've been aware of this game for a while, Syb. It's being made by the same people that make Conan Exiles. Generally loved game. From what I understand, when it originally came out, it wasn't as well. I might be wrong, but I think it wasn't as well received when it came out, but the developers kept working on it, and it became a game that you can easily sink 400 hours into because it's so addictive. So naturally, people have been wondering how the hell they're going to be handle a property like Dune, a beloved property like Dune, but more importantly, how are they going to be able to make an MMO out of a planet that's mostly made out of sand? Well, There was a Dune Awakening Direct that happened a few days ago, Side. And they showed a gameplay trailer, and gave us a lot of details of the type of stuff that we'll be getting into this, that we'll be able to do in this game. First, let's just give our general impressions of the trailer. Oh, Unreal Engine 5. do I need to say more?
It really is giving us the best of what Unreal 5 can do.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very, very excited for this direction that gaming is going in with this tool, with this tech. It's really genuinely exciting to finally see this in something that I think that it could take advantage of to probably close to the peak of what it can.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing.
Yeah. They managed to make everything like... I mean, anybody who's seen any sort of demo with Unreal Engine 5 tech knows how good it is, and they have used it to its full effect with the world of Dune. This trailer is visually gorgeous, and okay, yeah, I don't need to go more into that. But anyways, let's talk about some of the things that are presented to us in the trailer. Well, actually, no. How do I want to go about this? I'll just read down the details of what were talked about, like what sorts of things we were able to do in the game as a part of this showcase. And a lot of it was shown in the trailer itself, but this just confirms it. First, it's an MMO, but it's primarily a survival and crafting game for the majority of the first several hours that you play of it. It's only later that the MMO elements come into play, when you get into PvP battles with other factions that exist around Arrakis, and you actually get to see, like, gives you a taste of just how massive these battles can be. And I hope they're not lying to us, Side, because if this is what some of the wide scale battles are going to be like, this is quite exciting. Let's see what else. Yes, you can fly ornithopters, and that was probably like the biggest wow moment of the entire trailer for me. Just how smooth and just epic the flying and the fighting with the ornithopters was. What else here? Yes, you can use the voice to mind control enemies, and I imagine you're going to be able to do a lot of that when you're trying to do stealth sections, which it sort of hinted at with the gameplay trailer, which, as somebody whose favorite gaming franchise is Metal Gear Solid, that makes me very happy. Of course, going back to the whole it being a survival game, part of survival on Arrakis is that you need to find moisture wherever you can get it. And it details some of the ways that you can go about that, one of which is you can draw blood from enemies that you kill. In case you guys don't know anything about Dune, yeah, this is how brutal it can be. But you could also find a few plants in these things called dew fields, which I imagine is something that's talked about a lot in the novels. I'm not aware of them. You can.
There's another game out called Dune Spice Wars.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And it has a lot of like the world element stuff in it that is not always. Is not always like people don't know about it. Like there is a giant like glacier on Dune,
Mm-hmm.
in a spot, and there is some of this other stuff that's there, and it's like it's really cool that it's there, but yeah, it's not covered, heavily.
I see.
In the common lore, because you got these things called the common lore, and then you get the micro stuff, like everybody's favorite sci-fi thing, the midichlorians, right? Like, that kind of stuff. That's where it kind of diverges. But they did have a lot of that in that game, which I really did enjoy, and I hope that you'll see some of that a little bit more commonly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for clarifying. A couple more things. One thing that sounds really cool is that you can align yourself with House Atreides or House Harkonnen, which are sort of the primary house factions, at least at the beginning of the Dune story, and you can rise through their ranks to achieve certain positions of power. That's very cool. The only thing that might come as a disappointment to some people is that you cannot kill or ride the sandworms at launch. There's a possibility that you might be able to do that later on, depending on how well the game turns out. But yeah, Sai, that's everything we know. combined with the trailer that we got, this looks... I don't know if there's ever been an MMO that I've been more excited for. And I'm terrified because, I mean, as people who have... both of us have played World of Warcraft, we know how much that can eat up your time. And I might just be tempted enough to play at least a little bit of this with my wife because she liked the Dune movie. I took her to see it. And she might want to engage with this once it finally comes out. Yeah, it looks badass. Aside from the visuals, what else did you think about the trailer?
It was really good. There was a couple notes I took, and I forgot about them.
Oh, darn. Okay.
It's like in Unreal Engine 5, like, thank goodness that we're finally getting a good example of what it can do.
Yeah.
And then the community aspect of it, there's potential here for like big group projects, building projects and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
I hope we get that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced that we will, though.
I do...
or at least not at launch.
Yeah, what I primarily care about is, am I going to be able to engage in epic land and aerial battles in the Dune universe? And from what the trailer seems to present to me, it seems like I'm going to be able to do that. And given how violent and how brutal the world of Dune is, those battles can be pretty... I imagine those battles can end up being pretty epic. So, yeah, it's... I'm terribly excited. One quick question, though, before we move on. Do you have any trepidation about the developers of Conan Exiles being able to make a compelling game that you can play for hundreds of hours in a world like Arrakis?
If you had asked me a long time ago, I would have said Failcom making another MMO, BS kind of thing. But yeah, that's intense.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, do you think they'll be able to pull it off?
I hope so. I think so.
Yeah.
Because, it's sort of one of those things where it's like, I don't want to blame them forever for the mistakes that they've made in the past, because they did make a lot of mistakes in the past. So yeah.
All right, well, fair enough. We don't know what the release date is yet. I am very much looking forward to it, though. We will continue to update you guys on this game and the franchise as we're moving forward, because it doesn't look like it's going to die in popularity anytime soon. Although when Dune Messiah comes out, based on what I know about that book and how it might be adapted, I might, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyways, let's move on to the next story. We're going to be kind of going on a roller coaster of emotions with this podcast. We're starting off positive, very positive, because the Dune Awakening trailer was awesome. And now we're going to have to talk about something that kind of sucks. So, Syb, you and I have talked a lot about our distaste for the way that Nintendo tends to handle emulation, and how it would be either in their interest to support it as in whatever way benefits them, or to, if they're not going to support it, make it so that their older games on older consoles are easier to access and don't run on hardware that, belonged like on store shelves 20 years ago. Well, Nintendo has just taken has just given another huge blow to those who try to emulate and preserve their games. And I'm sort of mixed on my feelings about it, even though, you and I have made our distaste about the way Nintendo has handled this in the past. It's a little bit more complicated here, although I do still generally hold the sentiment that I always have. But let's get into this. So, there's damn it, I don't have the name of the developers offhand, unfortunately. I'll get that in a second. But there's a couple of very popular Nintendo emulators. One's called Yuzu, which is the emulator that people use for the Nintendo Switch, and another called Citra, which was used for the Nintendo 3DS. Citra has been in development, constant development, ever since 2014, and Yuzu has been in constant development ever since 2018. Well, a couple days ago, it was announced that development on these emulators would cease indefinitely and never come back. And that's because the developers had to settle out of court with Nintendo by paying them $2.4 million in damages, while also shutting down all development and scrubbing their software from the internet. The original suit that Nintendo filed against them is that the emulator illegally circumvents the Switch's game encryption keys, and that the emulator helped promote the download of 1 million copies of The Legend of Zelda before launch. The thing is, Nintendo seems to have at least the legal argument on their side. I understand that as a company, you want to protect the value of your IP. And, even though like the Tears of the Kingdom sold like 20 million copies, 1 million copies is still millions of dollars. And as
I completely disagree with that number, by the way.
Oh, with 1 million?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that it's a stretch to say that it's a 500,000. Like a really big stretch to say it's 500,000.
Okay.
That's assuming that basically almost like half or like 90% of the people that own a Switch were utilizing this and playing that specific game. And again, it's like Nintendo does this to themselves to the point where it's like every time we talk about it, it's just like, Nintendo, you want to sell another 10 million, 20 million copies? Put this on the PC.
Yeah.
Put this on the other consoles. And you will make, if you put it up for $120, $150 US, there's still going to be people who are going to be buying it. You would probably make more money than your entire Switch program makes right now by doing this. And this is so confusing as to why they continually do this. And then when they go after these companies so aggressively, being like, no, this is ours. It's like, well, the only problem why this is an issue is because you just refuse. You refuse to change it.
Yeah.
And it's so infuriating.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Sab. And this is stuff that we've talked about and we've gone over lots of times. Right. But here's the deal. On a legal basis, I do believe that Nintendo is in the right. I didn't say the moral right. I said the legal right. And here's why. The Switch is different from other Nintendo consoles because they use encryption keys, and the nature of these encryption keys, if you were to try and bypass them, it violates DRM, which is protected by DMCA laws. This is why if you try to use a Game Boy emulator or a Super Nintendo emulator, it's legal because they don't have these types of encryption keys. And what Yuzu, the people behind Yuzu, was allegedly doing was instructing people how to obtain these encryption keys and how to decrypt them using lockpicking software, all while, by the way, making roughly 30,000 American dollars per month on Patreon. Now, let me ask you this, Saib. Do you think that the majority of people who use emulators actually own copies of the games?
In most cases, yes. There is cases where obviously that's not true, but in most cases, these people had this. They owned it on the Switch format. It's just the not the Switch format. Sorry, the Nintendo. No, that is the Switch. No, wait. What is the latest model of the Nintendo called?
Switch.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I goofed that with the Steam one.
Okay. Well,
they know that the majority of those people do, because the people who own a Switch tend to own, like, the ownership of those people who own the Switch, the household average for those that also have, like, basically everything else is very high. So we're talking about like a full ownership of like a lot of other Nintendo products, a lot of PlayStation products, a lot of Xbox products, usually a PC or two. And they want the freedom and the mobility to play whatever they're playing on whatever the device they happen to be in whatever room in their house they happen to be sitting in.
Right.
That's the way that those sales work.
Yeah.
And it has for a long time. Market research has confirmed that's why the Google VR or the Google thing, the not the VR, but their live streaming thing was pointless because they weren't offering anything that wasn't super unique, and the games that they were streaming that were unique were like, you were pitching it to the wrong people. So that's the thing. And this is where it's like, I know this is a really hot button topic and there's so many different aspects to it, and some of those are confusing legal ones, but the market data that I'm aware of, and the fact that they went after them saying, this company was making $30,000 USD on Patreon per month because they were doing they were showing these exploits and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Again, whether or not they were, when they're throwing around that number, $30,000 on Patreon a month, that's standardized numbers. There's a half a dozen, companies that I know of that I'm involved with on Patreon that make that much money on their projects every month. And so that's like saying they're mid to upper high average on Patreon. So again, the financial numbers that they're throwing around, the insinuations they're making about all of the cheaters and exploiters and all this kind of stuff, the vast majority of those cases are not true. Was there about 1 million people who were playing it on the again, not on the Switch, but on the other handheld devices?
Yeah.
Yes. Why? Well, why would they do that when they own the game on Nintendo? Why would they do that?
Because the Switch hardware sucks.
Because the Switch hardware sucks.
Yes.
And that's the biggest problem. What they're doing is ultimately going to end up hurting Nintendo down the road. This is going to hurt Nintendo a lot because you're going to look at a new game and you're going to go, yeah, I'd love to play that game, but it plays like garbage on the only thing that I'm allowed to legally play it on. So therefore, I'm not going to legally play it at all. I'm not going to play it at all, not legally or otherwise, because it's just like I watched somebody trying to play the game and it was extraordinarily chunky.
Oh, yeah.
Very bad. And it was rough. Like, it's a good game, but the mechanic, like what they're trying to force everybody to play it on is absolutely mental.
Yeah, nobody wants to play Tears of the Kingdom at 1080p at best, 30 FPS, or 720p on handheld. They want to play it at 4K, 60 FPS, because that's the industry well, no, 4K, 60 FPS is sort of the ideal goal. The standard is more like 1080p, 1440p, 60 FPS. But still, Nintendo, the point is they're lagging behind. Now, the problem is, despite the fact that I agree with the vast majority of what Syb is saying, Nintendo has it within their right, and to some degree it is their duty, to protect their IP. And the fact of the matter is, whether or not I'm not even particularly sure whether or not the majority of the people who are playing games are playing them legally or illegally on these emulators. Enough of them are playing it illegally that I don't necessarily blame them legally for going after them to protect their IP. Morally, I completely disagree. Like Syb said, they need to make it. This is especially the case with the 3DS, which is no longer supported. There needs to be a way where people who have purchased these pieces of hardware are still able to play them long after they're no longer supported. How the hell are people supposed to play, I don't know, Ocarina of Time HD or Majora's Mask HD without the use of Citra? I mean, there are probably other 3DS emulators out there, but they're not being as they're given as much attention as Citra and Yuzu were. So unless Nintendo steps up and actually does what they should do, which is provide us with a vast library of games on the hardware that they're putting out, then no crap. I don't blame people who are trying to emulate them. But as it stands right now, Nintendo has, they have won legally, but thankfully they haven't set some sort of precedent. Yuzu and Citra have been shut down, but that doesn't mean that other emulators can learn from their mistakes and try to keep their software up so that people can use them. It's just, this has been a big setback, but thankfully it's not as big a setback as it could have been. So, Syb, any closing thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, like I said, overall, in the long run, what this is going to hurt the most is this is going to hurt Nintendo the most down the road, period. Because what they're doing is they're not playing nice with their fans.
Yeah.
If they wanted to play nice with their fans, they would be doing something. There's a lot of people who are going to be, there's a lot of kids who they've been, they have a broken Switch, but they have another piece of technology that they use to play the Nintendo games on, who are waking up today unable to play their Nintendo games. And they're crying and they're going, why can't I play the Nintendo games? And they're going, well, because Nintendo doesn't want you to play the Nintendo games on the tool that you use to play the games on. They want you to play it on this other tool. That broken thing, Jimmy broke that 3 weeks ago. Yes, I know, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Oh, okay, fine then. I guess I'll go play Fortnite. It's a very, very, very stupid decision that they made here. I understand that they had a kind of a legal obligation to do this, but they should take the L on this and sell it on bloody Steam.
Yeah,
because we're at the point now where, okay, you've had all your big sales. You're using antiquated technology to try and force people into this really narrow thing. This isn't going to work, and I swear we're gonna be seeing the fallout of this down the road for probably years to come. Not in the in the emulation world. Again, this is just like it's just bad. It's just bad because if Nintendo, something catastrophic happens at Nintendo, the majority of their stuff is just going to be lost forever.
Yeah, and it'd be tragic because they do make, despite their business practices, they do make some of the greatest games ever. So, yeah, hopefully this situation can be ratified by other people working on emulators. Anyways, let's move on to a piece of good news, which is following up on a piece of bad news that we reported on recently. Obviously, the Activision Blizzard merger was completed a little while ago. Took forever, but it finally happened. The merger with Microsoft, that is. Unfortunately, one consequence of it was that Microsoft came in and laid off 1,900 employees, just trying to trim the fat. Unfortunately, they decided to trim the fat from one of the best developer teams that they have, Toys for Bob. Mm-hmm. They gave me the Spyro Reignited trilogy, which I love to pieces because Spyro 2 and 3 are some of my favorite games of all time. I still play those games every 1 to 2 years and have an absolute blast with them. So relaxing to play. And they gave us something that we, Crash Bandicoot fans, hadn't had for almost 2 decades, which was a fantastic Crash game post Crash 3 Warped. They gave us Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, and oh my god, Syb, that game is so amazing, and it was so amazing because it was produced by people that love the franchise. Now, ever since Crash 4, It's About Time came out, back in, I think it was 2020, they have been teasing a follow-up, much like what they did with Crash 4, to Spyro. Like Crash 4 pretended all the games that came out after Crash 3 didn't exist, they were going to do the same thing with the Spyro franchise. And as somebody who's autistically in love with the Spyro franchise, I have been dying for this game to come out. And unfortunately, Toys for Bob and the employees over there have been dicked around so much because they've been put on Call of Duty and Call of Duty Warzone, which just makes my heart hurt for the people over there. And then a whole bunch of employees got gutted during the layoffs. To the point that there were some rumors going around that it seemed like the entire company is basically dissolved because they've been, it's like that meme from The Godfather. Look how they massacred my boy. It's like that. That's how I feel. I feel like Don Corleone looking at the corpse of Fredo. Is that what his name is? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, thankfully, Toys for Bob came out a few days ago. I think it was on the 29th of February, and cleared the air. They posted on their main website a statement with a purple banner, by the way, saying that they are going to become an independent game development studio. I'm going to read what they said verbatim. Over the years, we've inspired love, joy, and laughter for the inner child in all gamers. We pioneered new IP and hardware technologies in Skylanders. We raised the bar for best-in-class remasters in Spyro Reignited Trilogy. We've taken Crash Bandicoot to innovative, critically acclaimed new heights. With the same enthusiasm and passion, we believe that now is the time to take the studio and our future games to the next level. This opportunity allows us to return to our roots of being a small and nimble studio. To make this news even more exciting, we're exploring a possible partnership between our new studio and Microsoft. And while we're in the early days of developing our next new game and a ways away from making any announcements, our team is excited to develop new stories, new characters, and new gameplay experiences. Our friends at Activision and Microsoft have been extremely supportive of our new direction, and we're confident that we will continue to work closely together as part of our future. Now here's the key part, Sybe. So, keep your horns on and your eyes out for more news. Thank you to our community of players for always supporting us through our journey. We can't wait to share updates on our new adventure as an indie studio. Talk to you soon. Sybe, if their next game is not Spyro 4, I'm going to literally start a riot. Because this is not okay. You have a purple banner and say, keep your horn, and then you better be if it's not Spyro 4.
I think what we're gonna see is them I don't know the ins and outs of it, other than I think that this is a passionate team that has been I don't put this at the fault of Microsoft in the sense of they looked at it and they saw no worth. What happened is they looked at the team not as a whole, but as what have you been doing for the last 3 years?
Uh-huh.
Which the answer to that is, oh, well, we were polishing Mr. Bobby Kotick's yacht for the 500th time. So we haven't really made anything substantial for the company. Okay, well, we don't really need people who sit around and polish yachts, so you can go now.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of concept is I think really what happened here, and that is to say that I think Phil should not have let that happen. I think he's kind of a fool for letting that happen. You have to, and I've said this before on a lot of cases with Microsoft taking over these studios, is Microsoft needs to have an ecology of games as a whole that improve their entire lineup. And yes, that means that there are some things that you're not going to make direct money off of.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things in a lot of companies where there's that. And in fact, I believe one of the stats is that 90% of what you pay people for in your company, if you have a very large company, 90% of those things that you're paying for, those people that you're paying for, those salaries that you're paying for, don't actually make you any money. But without them, you wouldn't have an operating company.
Yeah.
It really boils down to that. And we have to look at this and say, look, Spyro is one of these things, the Toys for Bob, some of these games, Yeah, they may not be the big mega blockbusters, but that's not how this works. When you have a lot of games and you have a giant ecology of like all these cool things that people are playing, all of those things are bringing people to the table
Mhm.
and keeping them engaged. If McDonald's only served burgers and only burgers, meaning that if you wanted to get a drink or if you wanted to get a soft drink, an ice cream, fries, you were told, no, we don't sell that here. Do you think that would increase their business or would that decrease their business? They might be the best burger guys in the planet, but eventually they're going to run into a wall and just not be able to do anything.
Yeah.
And this is where again it's like this is the warning that I sent to EA ages ago. This is the warning that I've sent to Riot when they had their cuts just recently. This is the warning that Microsoft gets. If you don't encourage a healthy ecosystem, as in i.e. you're taking care of the plants, the big animals, the megafauna, the major the megaflora, right down to the microbes, if you're not taking care of all of those things, you're doing it wrong. For the life of me, I do not know how or why we're not at a point where Microsoft doesn't buy out like Elon Musk has, just buy out an entire city, or like Disney. Disney is a good example of this too. It's like buy out an entire city, just an entire city, and then build 10 gigantic places where people make games.
Mhm.
And then you build a university there, you build a bunch of other things there that maximize and increase the amount of stuff that you get, and then you try to get as many different things running there as you can, as well as having like the biggest marketplace of ideas that you could possibly get,
Yeah.
because that's what's going to save you right
Yeah.
now. I think this shot them in the foot for later on down the road. Now, yeah, Microsoft might not even sweat it. They're so big that this might not actually cause them any grief at all in the future period, but it is going to cause some doors to close to them. And when you have this market, the more doors that are open, it's the better, because it's a marketplace of ideas, but it's also a marketplace, in the actual financial fiscal sense of like, hey, buy our products.
Mhm.
It's like, great. Do you have any products that cater towards my kid who really likes shiny, cute, happy little things going on the screen? No. Have you checked out Diablo 6?
Right.
Yeah, not really
Yeah.
what we're looking for. All right, well, I guess we're headed over to this other company that is outside of your purview. It's like, yeah, that's the mistake.
Yeah.
And
So, side.
yeah.
Sorry, I generally I agree with everything that you're saying when it applies to most games that Microsoft should be investing in. I don't agree when it comes to Spyro, and here's why. It's because Spyro Reignited Trilogy, since its release in 2019, has sold 10 million copies. And that is significant because, Assassin's Creed, the most recent Assassin's Creed, the major one, not Mirage, which I think was the most recent one, but the one before that, Valhalla, it sold 10 million copies in a year. And that's significant because Assassin's Creed makes so much money for Ubisoft that they are able to make so many stupid decisions and stay in business because of the amount of money that Assassin's Creed makes. The fact that Spyro sold that many copies, Microsoft and Activision Blizzard must not like money.
Yeah.
Make Spyro 4. Make him your mascot. Please, just give me Spyro 4.
You're right. Like this is so, it's so easy when you think about it. It's like, what does Microsoft and Blizzard really need right now to get the Blizzard community back up and running? The community, as in like the players, the consumers. It's like you need a really good mascot right now.
Yeah.
And right now we don't have one. And I know what they're going to do. They're going to pass this off. Spyro's going to go to some other studio that's going to make a good or sloppy version of it. But they'll have lost the chance. And again, it's like again, it just goes back to having a marketplace. It's like in a marketplace, you see basically everything.
Yeah.
The more you have that marketplace, the more you have that thing, the more that you have that ability to go to this giant mall that has literally everything you could want, the more you just default to going to that mall. The minute that the mall says, yeah, if you're wearing blue jeans, we're just gonna ask you to leave. It's like, okay, what do you have against this? Well, it's just not really, we want to go for like a high, this is like really like, high society feel. And we feel blue jeans are too country. So just, take yourself out to the door there. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to lose. And again, I've seen this happen numerous times in numerous companies doing numerous things before. And I think that just overall, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And it's just a fault of like where they the imagination that they had. I don't blame this. I do not blame this on the new lady who has just come in charge, because her first day was like 2 days ago.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't blame that on her.
So like I suspect that she probably didn't think this was maybe a good idea. Maybe she did, maybe whatever, but she didn't have a hand in it until just now. So
yeah,
we cross our fingers and we hope that in the future they smarten up. And then as far as this team goes, I'm really excited to see where they go, what they do. I hope they are able to come up with something quickly, and that it's really good, and that it teaches them the lesson of like, yeah, stop throwing away stuff that is really valuable.
Yeah. If anybody from Toys for Bob is listening to this, please, I would love to partner with you whenever Spyro 4, whenever your new game comes out, even if it's not Spyro 4, I'll be pissed, but I'll still want to support you just because you gave us Crash 4. And I want you to be as good so that you can give us, as financially secure so you can give us Spyro 4 at some point. Anyways, I think me getting upset over Spyro 4 has made me have an allergic reaction because my eye is getting puffy as hell right now. So let's go through these next stories relatively quickly. Okay, Sweet Baby Inc. What the hell is that?
There is no way to cover this quickly, but I will do my best.
Okay, so, fine, yeah.
So Sweet Baby Inc. I want people to understand that there is nuance. All right, there is a lot of nuance in a lot of things. And if you go back a decade to the Gamer Great Days, there was a lot of nuance in the arguments that were happening. And with nuance, I'm going to try to be laser focused on this. With nuance, there is, of course, people who come around to grift things, right? If you have a fire in a community that devastates something, you're going to get grifters. If you have a giant new discovery of some magical resource that makes things better, you're going to have grifters. If you have a political puritanism ideal of something, you're going to have grifters. If you have a very liberal, free-thinking way, you're going to have grifters. I want to say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Sweet Baby Inc., which is a company that does consulting work and writing work for video games, they are grifters. They were created by grifters. They are staffed largely by grifters, and they have been grifting on this idea of adding diversity into gaming. And this all came to a head just a few days ago, and it is still blowing up right now as we record, where there was this. So the company itself, like I said, they create diversity in game by coming in as consultants and writers to help on projects. Every game that they've worked on, the aspects that they've worked on, because they don't do gameplay, they don't do map design, they don't do that kind of stuff. They do story. Everything that they've been attached to that I have been able to find is been lesser because of it. And the thing that people who go, no, they're trying to make it more inclusive for everybody. I need you to understand. I really need you to understand that you really need to do homework and look into stuff. So I looked into these people. I looked into a lot of this stuff. Some of the people who are at the core of this company are grifters, 100%. They don't believe in your cause. They don't believe in what you're doing. They are people who are using you to make money for themselves. And this has come out in a big way in this story. Again, because we are covering this very quickly, there's a bunch of other YouTubers who have gone through, painstakingly like scrub these people's like Twitter accounts. These are people who do not practice what they preach. They do things that are counterintuitive to you, the consumer, to us, people reporting on video games, and to the devs themselves. They've been responsible for a lot of bad products over the years. They're the primary writers on games like Suicide Squad, which is just shocking. Like, you go back to the first Arkham game, how many writers? 2.
Yeah.
How many writers on Suicide Squad? 26.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. And most of them, this company. And
you're kidding me.
I'll say that Alan Wake was a pretty good game, and it was a good game because of mechanics, because of scene direction, that kind of stuff. But there were some writing things that I disagreed with. And I kind of looked at it and looked at the claims that were being made. Again, these aren't like I pulled up some some random Twitter account that was making accusations. I'm looking at what they are saying on their own Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
And what they're claiming is they're claiming all this stuff that people had issues with, that people didn't like, that people felt were overly preachy or just really condescending to them, and things that they didn't like. And these are the people who are saying, we're making it better. It's not, we want to remove, again, here's a quote from one of them. We want to remove white male cis characters from gaming completely. I don't know why anybody would think that that's a good idea, because, again, with a diversity of ideas, you want to cater to as many people as you can.
Yeah.
And these are the people who, back at the Gamergate, and one of the reasons why I mentioned this, all of these people were involved in that. They were on the sides of like protecting the journalists who were getting caught having, bribed things from gaming companies who bribed good reviews, which was very much an issue. There's other issues there too. Lots of nuance. Like I said, there's not one particular thing that was correct on that. There's lots of different opinions.
Yeah.
But the idea that these people were coming, that there's some kind of a savior that's here to save gaming, it's like, no, that's not what they're here for. That's not what they're trying to do. And we can see this in that a guy from Brazil made a thing in Steam, made a community in Steam that just notified people whether or not the game that they were buying had worked with Sweet Baby Incorporated or not. And they weren't throwing out aggressive, they weren't going against terms. There were some people who were being overly aggressive, and they were being banned and reported by the members of this community.
Yeah.
But largely, none of the founders or big people involved in this, the moderator wasn't doing that. He appeared on a couple of shows. He did a show with Asmongold talking about his opinions, and they were very basic and fairly nuanced. He wasn't a big political guy. He's from Brazil. He speaks Portuguese. As a primary language, English is a very rough, I believe, third language, because he speaks Spanish more than English, I think. And he said, look, we're just here saying that this company has been grifting these other companies, the actual studios and developers that they work with, and they've been grifting the community, and they don't even practice what they preach. And they showed how some of these guys were like filthy racist comments in their history on Twitter. Not even like, we're not talking like 10 years ago. We're talking like 2 years ago. And they're grifting.
Yeah.
And these guys say, and Sweet Baby, bunch of these people came on and said, we want Steam to take down this page, and we want them to permanently ban everybody who was a part of it. Steam said, no, that's not how, free speech works. When you're obeying by our rules, and we have very strict rules on targeted harassment, all that kind of stuff. They're not harassing you. They're pointing out that you're a company that's not doing your job effectively. That's allowable. And so these guys go on to Twitter. They actually are so hostile on Twitter that Twitter actually bans them for breaking terms of service of targeted harassment. And again, there's a lot of nuance here. But the point is, and this is a very active, very live story.
Yeah.
The thing that we want to point out, that I wanted to point out on this, is that Sweet Baby is 100% in the wrong as far as what they do.
Yeah.
One, for the fact that they're not very good at what they do, because the stories that they write or change are not very good. But primarily, their primary goal is censorship. Because I looked into it and I asked a fellow who had been in one of their meetings, and I said, what is the first thing that they talk about in their meetings when they're meeting with a development studio? What are they saying? Like, what are they bringing? Are they talking about like how to include like more things in an intelligent way? Like, are they talking about that? He said the first thing that they said was that here's a list of things that you can't say anymore. And it was a very big, long list. So this falls under the system of, this is basically censorship. It's not censoring a product after it was made. It's censoring a product before it's made. And I just did a big deep dive into Liberty Leads the People, which is an artistic painting, a very massive painting that was done in the French, during the French Revolution. Censorship is never good. It never takes you in the direction that you want, and it most often backfires on you or the people that implemented it on their ideology down the road. There are lots and lots of cases where this is 100% proven correct. My favorite example is Japan. Japan had a very stiff, very harsh censorship rule on anything that you might consider lewd, and now that same material is 10% of their GDP. You never know how it's going to react, how it's going to backfire, how it's going to tweak or change the community. Again, just watching Dune, one of the greatest things in that movie was they're talking about how do they deal with this one particular thing. And they're like, well, if you try to crush a religion, you'll make it more popular. Yeah. If you try to kill a prophet, you make him a martyr. And you instill the things that you're trying to create. And this is the problem with these companies going out to say, we're going to make sure that you're only getting content that we want you to have. And that is not an ideology that's good, and is not an ideology that makes for good products, and it most certainly is not an ideology that makes for long-term success in whatever you're espousing to do. So the story, check it out. Please don't immediately jump on one way or the other. And even when it comes to Sweet Baby, what they're wanting, what they're looking for, like, I agree. I think that more games should have more options for main characters. Like that's not a bad request. I was on this for a long time, but I'll tell you where they lost me is when I said, yes, you know what the best example of this is main characters for Mass Effect, because you could just pick whichever one you wanted. And I was told that was wrong. Why was it wrong? Because it wasn't one or the other. It wasn't exclusive. So therefore it wasn't equal. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how those two words factor. If you have a game where your primary protagonist is a choice to the player to make a free choice as to what they want to play, and you give them as much availability on, like, sex, gender and personality functions, whether they're good character, bad character, whether they swing one way or the other in the bed, like all of that stuff, that's a bonus. Like, that's a good thing when you have that. But when they say, no, it's not exclusive enough, that's where you lose the plot, because you're literally saying, no. We don't want there to be games where you get to choose. We want games where you don't get to choose and you're forced to play something that you don't necessarily can't really understand, because that's not your lived experience. It's like, okay, if you want to have that interaction with lived experience, that's where you write good characters that your character then interacts with.
Yeah.
That's how you win it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna offer my quick thoughts on this, and then we have to
Yeah,
quickly
and
move
then we
on
got to move
because
on.
honestly, Side, like I got a COVID shot like a few hours ago, and it's
And it's
actually starting to kill
starting to
me.
get to you. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
like
right.
my eye.
What's your thoughts on
Okay,
this?
so it's pretty much consistent with how it's always been. When it comes to promoting diversity in games, I'm all about it. As long as people demand it organically and don't harass people because they have a particular artistic vision that they want to put into their product, that's fine. And you know what? One game that I thought recently did a decent job with it was Spider-Man 2. But when I thought that, I thought that with the caveat that if this was done organically and because the people behind the team wanted to put a lot of diversity in that game, that's fine. But I get the sneaking suspicion that a lot of it was put in there because of some sort of committee.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, Sweet Baby Inc. influenced the creative direction of Spider-Man 2. And that especially pisses me off because what I later learned after Spider-Man 2 came out is that a lot of the diversity that they put into that game was only diversity that you can view if you were in a Western nation. If you bought Spider-Man 2 in Asia or like outside of the West, a lot of that stuff got censored. So it's like, if you really care about that sort of stuff so much, and you're going to, people behind this company from the research that I've done have admitted that their goal is to try and make life difficult for people that don't do what they do. I'm dead serious, by the way. Why aren't you doing it when it comes to territories that aren't in Europe and North America?
Mm-hmm.
Be consistent with what you want and don't be an asshole in order to achieve your aims, and do it for good reasons. Do it because you want to represent the world and its viewpoints in a way that is healthy and fosters good creative expression and healthy dialogue between people of all different backgrounds. I'm all about that. And the way that Sweet Baby Inc. is going about that is not the right way to do it. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. So interesting again. I really want to emphasize this. It's lots of nuance here with this argument, with what people are thinking. You can't lump everybody together. This group that is organized on Steam is up to 150,000 people.
Wow.
So people are feeling this. They're hearing this, and they feel like they're not being heard. And then to not look into this stuff, that's where obviously you make a mistake. So I'm going to definitely say, as a caveat, please look into this more. Read what more people are saying. Read what more people are researching on this. There are. I didn't want to quote anything like super verbatim with like a name of so and so said this, because I don't want to encourage any form of like jumping to conclusions or whatever. Look this stuff up. People have already documented this really well. Refer to those documented cases to make sure that you're getting the whole story. And again, we could probably spend about 3 hours on this topic. The fact that we're only covering it in less than 10, it's iffy. So anyways, next story, we've got City Skylines and Larian. What do these two things have in common?
I don't know, not a lot, but what is it?
It's the modding. It's the modding issues. And really what we're seeing in both of these games, which this is kind of a quote here with City Skylines. With City Skylines, the CEO came out and said that this City Skylines 2 was his biggest regret.
Oh.
And that is because they had this vibrant, very active, very popular game with City Skylines 1, very active. Then they kind of rushed out City Skylines 2. And without modders currently modding the game is basically unfunctionable. That's how much they are requiring modding at the moment, and how much
Jeez.
the modding community is helping that. The studio realizes that this has been a big problem. A bunch of options and tools and systems that are built within the first game, that because it had been out for so long, not only through both modding but DLC content, that kind of stuff being added. The game just was not that game was doing amazingly well, whereas number two doesn't have a lot of those things.
Mhm.
So number two has come out and is hemorrhaging players,
Mhm.
is hemorrhaging goodwill from the community, because it's just A, not that polished, B, doesn't have that much content, looks beautiful, but that's about it. They traded away the visuals, the smoothness, the guaranteed content that you had in the first game,
Yeah.
for a game that just is missing a large chunk of that stuff. Tell me how many times you've seen a company do a similar thing before, right? Like, this is super common.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, this has been so bad that they're now looking at it as a whole from a company aspect, saying we really, really messed up here. And the only thing holding this game together right now are the modders. Conversely, with Larian, you have the kind of the same thing in the community aspect. Not much else involved in the story, but in the community aspect, you have modders who are trying to bring in things to the game that can't, because every least once a week there's a hot fix that comes out and that breaks pretty much every mod in the game right now, specifically those that are tied to the script extender within Baldur's Gate 3. And
Yeah.
if you're used to modding Skyrim, you know how important
And
script extender is.
very important. It won't
And
work if you don't have
yes,
it.
and if you make a tweak to that, how that mod functions, you break every single mod that uses that in one way or another. And that is the problem that they're currently having right now. They're having this enormous difficulty of trying to make this run from the Baldur's Gate perspective, and the community got a little hostile
No.
recently.
Jeez.
And I wanna say the hostility never works. Like, conversation makes things work so long as people are engaging. And I will say that Baldur's Gate was engaging. They understood that there were a lot of problems that were being caused with the modding, but they've said repeatedly, modding is on the books. It's in the schedule. We can't get to it for a little while more. We need to do all of these other big fixes. Once those fixes are all done, then we bring out the official mod tools. You will not have this problem happening at all. But because it was such a common issue, there was some general hostility happening here. That's the news plug, is that people were being openly hostile to the developers of Baldur's Gate, which again, I'm like, guys, please don't. No, like Larian has done the best job they possibly could have, even with the concept of like them going above and beyond what most other companies have done when it comes to, like, the fact that their game sold way more copies than they were expecting. There's way more interest and all this other stuff. But it is an interesting dichotomy in that for City Skylines, the game would literally not function without these modders right now. And then for Larian, you have the modders who are desperately trying to add these things to the game that people really want. And every time this breaks something, that stops their community, that stops anybody who's using that mod from continuing to use that mod. I have actually, and for this reason, I have actually stopped playing Baldur's Gate completely. I haven't actually been able to get the end finish that I wanted, because of all of the changes that were being made so quickly. I knew that there was a big change to the end game stuff coming up, so I was like, all right, well, if I'll wait till that comes out. Then I heard, oh, they're bringing out stuff for the romances. I'm like, well, I definitely don't want to miss out on that. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to literally sit on this. I already got to the end, one of the endings of the games, and I was happy with that. But what I want to do is, when I play through it again, I want the all of the mods and all the kind of stuff. And so that kind of perspective makes me really understand both sides of the argument. But right now I'm like, we can just wait. There's no problem in waiting. And then looking at how other companies have handled this, specifically with City Skylines 2, modders really are an integral part of your community, and you want to keep them around for as long as you can, and you want to help them as much as you can without going overboard. And I think that in these two scenarios, we have two scenarios that really teach us the importance of how modding works, but also the timing of it.
Yeah.
You have to wait for the right opportunity. Sometimes I know it's really exciting to get in and mod certain stuff, and you really want to get your hands on that kind of stuff. And there really is a lot of stuff that I want to mod in Baldur's Gate, but I for the moment I'm just waiting on it because it's just not really in the cards at the moment, and it's not the end of the world because I'll be able to do that later. So
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sab. I don't have much to say at the moment. I'm kind of dying here, so we kind of just need
okay,
to.
well,
I'm so sorry.
I'll cover this last story. It's a real quick one. It's very interesting. The skinny on this one is that Canada, our government, inept as it is in pretty much absolutely everything, as all governments are, has actually come out with a very interesting concept behind IP protection.
Uh-huh.
You know what happens when these big, giant, mega conglomerates come in and they buy up a gaming studio and they buy the IP, and then a few months later, EA cancels the IP. Oh, I mean, excuse me. I mean, a studio that a publisher maybe buys that IP, and then they close down the studio, and then that IP sits in a, I don't know, Russian hard asset vault for the next 20 years. That kind of sucks for people who like that IP. Well, for some weird reason, again, completely confusing as to why, the Canadian government has decided that that should actually be kind of protected. And I applaud that. It's just so weird coming from the Canadian government because it's been so messed up for so long. And you're just like, huh, that's a weird thing for them to randomly choose to do. Like, there's a lot of problems going on here, a lot. But protecting our intellectual properties when it comes to video gaming, that's really cool. And I hope that this kind of goes through, and I'll give it my support. Or certainly, if it's done correctly, if it's done like some things in government, then it's mindless and pointless for the most part. But it's an interesting story. It basically sets up, I think, something that if it's adopted by other countries, will end up protecting IPs when they are bought out from companies. Say that they want one aspect of the company, and they don't really care about the story IP about a purple little dragon, right? And that's how that fixes into the earlier story. So yeah,
Right.
protection for future IPs, is that on the cards? Let's hope so, because that makes sense. Congratulations on a politician making something make sense for once.
Yeah, well, they say that a broken clock is right twice a day.
Right twice a day.
Yeah, and that certainly applies to the Canadian government, and I say that
Yeah.
as a fellow Canadian alongside Simon. Anyways, guys, that does it for this episode of Maximum News. Like, comment, subscribe. I really gotta go. My eye, I need to run it under some cold water. I feel like, hopefully I'm not gonna die. No, I'm not gonna die, but okay. Cy, thanks as always. Anything you want to plug before we're done?
No, that's it. I want, just hang tight. We got some cool stuff coming. Ash is working on some Dark Forces stuff. So yay!
Nice. You guys can find me just at my YouTube channel at Max Derrat. God, this has never happened to me. I have had so many. I've had I had to get a bunch of vaccines recently, and when I had the other 2 COVID vaccines, I never had this type of reaction. But I feel like I'm about to break out in hives. Okay, I'll be okay, guys. Just stay tuned until next week, until we do this again. All right, I love you all. Peace out. Stay yellow. Bye bye.